Welcome. I'm Beth Melton Seabrook. I'm a full-time working artist. I teach and create in this fabulous backyard studio just outside of Charleston, South Carolina. In this series, Tiny Tutorials, we're going to get an inside peek into all the tips and tricks and little fun things that I throw in when I'm working on my mixed media artwork. So, let's jump right in. Hi, welcome to another edition of Tiny Tutorials. I'm Beth Melton Seabrook and I'm coming to you live from the Elizabeth & Co. Art Studio in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. So today we're going to learn a few little techniques that I like to use when I'm putting patterns down on paper to use in my collage work. One of the things I love to do is dimensional collages. Here's an example of a palm tree that is done using papers that I have painted and then torn out and then applied to the surface of a canvas. I'll have a full-length tutorial class that will be coming up later, but in the meantime, I wanted to show you a few examples of how I get patterns down on the paper. So today we're going to work with some stamps, and by stamps I mean traditional style stamps like this one is a rubber stamp from rubbermoon.com, and then some not so traditional stamps. This is an example of one I made. There'll be a tutorial coming out on that soon about how to make your own stamps. Another example of one that I've made. Both of these are made with foam, and I can show you how to do that on that tutorial. But then I also like to use some very non-traditional things to use in my stamping, like the back of a Starbucks wrap that looks like corrugated cardboard on this side, the bottom of a flip-flop that I cut up into little sections, bubble wrap, your standard run-of-the-mill bubble wrap, and this is a little gripper that I got from the dollar store that you use to open the top of a jar, and it makes a really great pattern. So I'm going to show you a few of those really quickly. I'm using paint. The two brands I like are Liquitex Basics. I use this in the giant size, and I also like to use Golden Fluid acrylics. All of the paints I use are acrylic, water-based paints. And I also like to thin them down some. So I'm using quinacridone magenta mixed with white here to get kind of a pink color that will show up good on the screen. I'm painting it right on the surface of the cardboard wrapper from Starbucks, pressing down firmly to make sure I get a good contact, and then I'll do it, turn it around 90 degrees, and do it again so that you get a little crosshatch pattern. So that's the cardboard. The flip-flop, which is very interesting, it has two sides to it. One side has polka dot, raised polka dots on it. The other side has a raised line pattern. And I'm going to use a dark turquoise on this, and I'm going to do it over this kind of light blue that I've got already down on my paper. Another side to that is the stripe, so you just flip it over and you get the stripe on the other side. Again, very interesting pattern, and you can turn it the other way and get kind of a crosshatch. The other pattern I like to use is this. I love to go to the dollar store and get things that you might not think of to use as art supplies and use them as art supplies. So this is one of those. It's just a rubber gripper. I put paint on the surface of it and then lay it down on my paper. I can do it probably a few times before that pattern is used up. And my all-time favorite, bubble wrap. Let's see, I'm gonna mix kind of I'm mixing cadmium yellow and this dark teal cobalt color from Golden to get kind of a greenish color. What I'm doing is making some leaves that I'll use on my next collage, which will be a pineapple, by the way, so tune in later to find that full tutorial. So I've got a dark green, So what you want to think about is what you're going to put it down on. So if it's down on a color that's very similar to it, it doesn't show up as well. This is an example of that. Those colors are very similar. What I'm going to do is show you an example of something that will show up really well. So I've got cadmium yellow medium, mixing it with some white so that I've got a really bright yellow. I'm going to lay that down over here on top of this blue and green, and it shows up fairly well. You can also pattern on top of patterns. So there was that pattern that I just did with the gripper sponge, the gripper, rubber gripper, and now I'm putting some yellow on top of that. So those are some examples of non-traditional stamps. Then we also have just your regular stamps that you buy from an art supply. I'm going to do a dark blue on this one. This is a rubber stamp that I purchased from rubbermoon.com. I love their stamps. I'm going to put it up here. Very cool pattern. I'm going to use it a few times all over the paper before I used up all the paint. I've got another little one from them that I really like, and I'm going to do a white on this one. And that'll show up really well. White always shows up really well on these dark colors. So I'm just going to do it a few times until I've got my patterns covering the paper. And here's an example of a stamp that I've made myself. And you can tune into my upcoming tutorial to find out how to do that. I'm going to cover it with this dark cobalt, and I'm going to lay it down right in the center, getting a good pattern so that it transfers really well on the paper. I'm going to use it a few times. And there you go. So we've got the paper pretty much covered up with all kinds of patterns that we'll then use after this dries to make the top part of this palm tree or the pineapple, which is an upcoming class that I'll be offering a full tutorial that you can get by going to my website, www.elizabethandcoart.com. You can also find me on social media, Instagram at eandcoart, and then on Facebook at Elizabeth & Co. Art. Thanks again for joining us today, and I hope to see you next time.